Larry Page didn't grow up dreaming of building a company. He grew up obsessed with understanding how things worked. Born into a family of computer scientists, Larry was surrounded by technology from the very beginning. His home wasn't just a place to live, it was a place to experiment. Computers, magazines, research papers, they were everywhere. And while most kids played with toys, Larry took machines apart. Not to break them, but to understand them. Because even as a child, he wasn't satisfied with using things. He wanted to improve them. That mindset would define everything that came next. But the idea that would change the internet forever didn't start as a business plan. It started as a question. A simple, but powerful question. What if the entire web could be understood through its links? Not just what pages said, but how they connected to each other. At the time, search engines were messy, unreliable. They showed results, but not necessarily the right ones. Larry saw a different path. He imagined a system where links acted like votes, where the most valuable pages naturally rose to the top. That idea became PageRank, an algorithm that didn't just search the internet. It organized it, structured it, made it useful. And together with Sergey Brin, Larry turned that idea into something much bigger. A company called Google. But here's what made Larry different. He wasn't chasing success. He was chasing impact. From the beginning, he believed that technology should solve massive problems. Not just improve existing systems, but replace them with something fundamentally better. He called it 10x thinking. Not 10% better. 10 times better. That philosophy shaped everything Google built. Products that didn't just compete. They dominated. Google Search didn't just improve search. It redefined it. And then came even bigger ideas. Google Maps. Street View. Projects that aimed to map the entire world. To make every street, every location, instantly accessible. At the time, people thought it was unrealistic, too expensive, too ambitious. But Larry didn't see it that way. He believed that if something was useful enough, it was worth building, no matter how difficult it seemed. As Google grew into one of the most powerful companies in the world, Larry faced a new challenge. Scale. Managing a company that had become too big, too complex. Most leaders would tighten control, focus on operations. But Larry did the opposite. He stepped back, not from leadership, but from routine. And in one of his boldest moves, he restructured Google into Alphabet Incorporated, a new kind of company, one that separated core business from future innovation. This allowed Google to run efficiently, while freeing Larry to focus on what he cared about most: the future. Moonshot projects. Ideas that sounded impossible. Self-driving cars. Artificial intelligence. Radical technologies designed not for today, but for the next decade. Maybe even the next century. And through it all, Larry remained consistent. He avoided the spotlight. Rarely gave interviews. Stayed away from unnecessary attention. Because for him, it was never about fame. It was about building things that matter. Things that last. Today, Larry Page stands among the wealthiest individuals in the world. His net worth reaching into the hundreds of billions. But money was never the goal. It was the result. The byproduct of thinking differently. Of focusing on long-term impact instead of short-term gain. Because Larry Page doesn't think in quarters. He thinks in decades. In systems. In possibilities. He looks at problems most people accept. And asks a simple question. Why does it have to be this way? And more importantly, how can it be better? That's what makes him different. Not just intelligence. Not just vision. But the courage to think bigger than everyone else. To build things that don't exist yet. and to believe that the future can always be improved. From 0 to 1. High voltage. Sergey Brin didn't just arrive in America. He escaped into possibility. Born in the Soviet Union, Sergey grew up in a world where freedom of thought was limited, where curiosity had boundaries. His family, deeply rooted in mathematics and science, understood something early. If Sergey was going to reach his full potential, he needed a different environment. So they left everything behind and moved to the United States. A new country, a new system, a new beginning. For Sergey, it wasn't just a relocation. It was an opportunity. From a young age, his mind worked differently. Numbers made sense to him. Patterns revealed themselves naturally. He didn't just study data. He understood it deeply. Where others saw information, Sergey saw structure, connections, meaning. And that ability would become one half of something revolutionary. At Stanford University, Sergey met Larry Page. Two minds, different personalities, but one shared obsession: understanding the web, improving it, rebuilding it. While Larry focused on structure and systems, Sergey brought energy, curiosity, and a fearless willingness to experiment. Together, they created Google. But Sergey Brin was never the type to stay within limits. Even after Google became a global giant, he kept pushing further into unknown territory, into ideas that most people would call unrealistic. He became the driving force behind Google X, a secretive innovation lab dedicated to moonshot projects. This wasn't about small improvements. This was about redefining reality. Self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, advanced computing systems, and perhaps the most ambitious of all, Google Glass, a device that aimed to bring the digital world directly into human vision. The project was controversial, criticized, even mocked. But Sergey didn't stop. Because for him, failure wasn't the opposite of success. It was part of the process. He believed that if an idea wasn't risky, it probably wasn't big enough. And that mindset defined everything he built. But Sergey wasn't just an innovator. He was different in another way too. Where Larry Page was quiet and reserved, Sergey was expressive, playful, unpredictable. He would show up to the office on rollerblades, practice acrobatics, even go skydiving. Not for attention, but because that's who he was. That same energy shaped Google's culture. The creativity, the freedom, the willingness to experiment. From playful Google Doodles to unconventional office environments, Sergey helped build a company that didn't feel corporate. It felt alive. Over time, as Google evolved into Alphabet Incorporated, Sergey stepped away from daily management. He had already built something extraordinary. Something that didn't need constant control. But then came a new challenge: artificial intelligence. By 2024 and beyond, the AI race accelerated rapidly. New models, new systems, a global shift in technology. And Sergey Brin returned. Not as a public figure, not as a headline, but as a builder, working closely behind the scenes on projects like Gemini and next-generation AI systems. Because when the stakes are high, and the future is being rewritten, that's where he belongs. Today, Sergey Brin is still one of the most influential minds in technology. Not because he seeks power, but because he understands it. The power of data, the power of ideas, the power of taking risks when others hesitate. From an immigrant child with a passion for mathematics, to a pioneer shaping the future of artificial intelligence, his journey isn't just about success. It's about possibility. Because Sergey Brin doesn't just follow the future. He helps create it. High voltage.